Hello, my friends. So, recently I've been falling in love with TikTok, and it all started with the Cottagecore hashtag. Now, quarantine has been making so many of us long for the escape, and honestly, the cottagecore community just seemed so romantic. I wanted to dress up in long skirts and run through the forest with the breeze flowing through my hair, but alas, I'm pretty much stuck at home. Now, y'all know I live in Los Angeles, but I'm in the mountains above Los Angeles, so there's not much to do here. Here in the mountains. The mountains with trees. And that's when it hit me. I can have my own cottagecore reality right outside my house. So I got to work crafting the most perfect outfits for playing in the trees, picking flowers, lounging under a tree with a good book, and headed out. Then fall hit. It got cold, all the flowers disappeared, and well, living in the mountains just ain't as fun as TikTok makes it seem. But hey, I got some cute clothes out of it, and the neighbors probably think I'm nuts or a perpetual child, but either way, it makes social distancing so much easier, so yay! But now I have a cute, cozy cottagecore wardrobe, and I'll show you how I made it. Nothing screams cottagecore more than upcycling, so I took this large, deep green circle tablecloth from my craft thrift store haul back in March, and made a circle skirt from it following my skirt tutorial linked in the cards. I folded it into 4, and at the point, I found my waist circumference plus some seam allowance and divided it by pi. I measured down from the corner, cutting out a circle. Then I cut up one fold line to be able to put in a zipper. I took some black cotton and cut a waistband the length of my waist plus seam allowance, and about 4 inches wide. I added interfacing to it that was about 1.5 inches wide. I sewed the band right sides together to the skirt waist and ironed all of the seam allowances up toward the waist. Then I flipped the band over, ironed along the top side of the interfacing, and flipped the remaining raw edge under, top stitching it down. Then I found a matching vintage green zipper, and marked where the zipper stop would be along the seam that I cut. From there, I stitched the seam starting at the top with a wide basting stitch, but not back stitching. When I reached the zipper stop marking, I shortened the stitch length and back stitched, and continued to the end of the seam, ending with one more back stitch at the hem. After ironing the seam open, I pinned in the zipper and stitched around it. And since it was a tablecloth initially, the hem was already finished, so after plucking out the basting stitches by the zipper, I had a skirt that was wearable in less than an hour. Then I knew I needed an apron. I found this kind of chunky, loosely woven ivory fabric with silver tinsel, also from the craft thrift store haul. I cut a rectangle that was as long as my waist circumference, and about 20 inches long. The selvage had this cute little fringe to it, so I didn't hem the bottom of the apron, but I hemmed the 2 sides with a roll hem, and gathered the top edge. I gathered it by hand rather than by machine because since it's a pretty thick fabric, it was kind of difficult to get under the machine. Then I cut a waistband about 4 inches tall and long enough to go around my waist and tie in a cute bow. Then I pinned a piece of twill tape that was about as long as my half waist circumference measurement to the gathers so that it'd be easier to stitch the waistband too. I found the center of the waistband and apron and pinned them together, stitching them right sides together. From there, I folded the waistband wrong sides together and stitched only the ties down. Then I took a safety pin and pulled the ties through to the right side. Once the ties were ironed, I folded the seam allowance under along the apron part and top stitched it down, completing the apron. Lastly, I needed a peasanty, poety blouse. I had this wrap top idea living rent-free in my head for far too long, so I copied a pattern from another blouse I had. I cut 2 of the front piece and 1 back piece on the fold, and marked the dart slightly with a colored pencil on the wrong side of the fabric. The important thing to remember with wrap tops is to place the front neckline on the grain line or selvage to ensure it doesn't stretch out and, well, expose you to the elements. I then took my favorite vintage sleeve pack and cut out the long peasant sleeves. I sewed up the darts, tying off the end of one point of the dart rather than backstitching for a smooth finish. Then I stitched up the shoulder seams and ironed everything down. From there, I found the center of the sleeve cap and matched it up to the shoulder seam, and pinned in the rest of the sleeve to the arm side, right sides together. Any excess in the sleeve cap you can gather down and ease into the curve, but I just made a nice little pleat on each side of the shoulder seam and stitched it down. Then I stitched some twill tape along the right side of the neckline to prevent any stretching, ironed it, and rolled the edge to hem it. And then I stitched it down one more time right along the rolled edge along the twill tape. From there, I stitched the sides of the bodice together and down the sleeve, matching up the arm side. I added 2 lines of basting along the cuff and gathered it down, and then attached it to a cuff made from a rectangle about 4 inches tall and 10 inches long. From there, I cut a piece of wide elastic that was long enough to fit snugly around my forearm if I ever wanted to push the sleeves up from the wrist to my arm. I rolled the raw edge of the cuff in till the cuff was just tall enough to fit the elastic. I stitched the cuff down by flipping the sleeves wrong side out and stitching right along where the seam of the cuff joined to the gathering of the sleeve, but I left about a 2-inch gap to be able to pull the elastic through. I pulled the elastic through with a safety pin, and once I had the ends of the elastic through the cuff, I stitched them together and massaged the elastic back into the cuff. Lastly, I cut another piece of twill tape that was long enough to wrap around my waist twice, plus length to tie a bow at the back. I found the center of the tape and aligned it with the center back of the bodice, and stitched it down right sides together. I ironed it and rolled the raw edges inward, stitching it all down one more time like I did with the neckline. For the ties, you could also cut a piece of bias tape or even really a straight piece of your fabric and fold it like bias tape along this edge, but since this top was the same color as my twill tape, I just went for the easy route and used the tape. And with that, let's see the final looks. This first look I call the Playful Lumberjack. She's not really into cutting down trees, but boy does she love playing in the leaves. I paired my historically inspired fashion corset stay top thing from my last video with a plaid skirt I made using the same techniques as my green skirt, and of course my trusty work boots that I got for $4 at the thrift store, my best purchase ever. The second look I call the Princess. I paired the green skirt with a vintage wedding dress, my grandmother's gold-dipped leaf necklace, a wide leather belt that I thrifted, and once again, my boots. The princess isn't into the humdrum of the castle life, so she escapes to her cottage and garden, where she collects flowers for paints and pastries, and reads poetry to the critters that visit. This next look I imagined as a Danish writer who wanted to escape the modernization of the 50s by secluding herself in the woods with her lumberjill lover, but I think it looks more like a fall Aurora cosplay, so oops. My brand. I paired the peasant wrap top with my lace-up reversible vest from my Halloween video, a vintage velvet skirt from Depop, and pointy-toed leather witch shoes from the thrift store. For the accessories, I chose my grandmother's leaf necklace again, as well as an owl leaf barrette in mixed metals from my Nana Jerry. Who watches my videos? Say hi to my Nana Jerry! Hi Nana, I love you! And a leather belt that I thrifted. And honestly, I love this style of top so much that I actually made another, which leads me to the young maid. I imagined her as a young maid to a wealthy family who tries to sneak off to the woods for some time for her own, but let's be real, it just looks like a peasant Cinderella cosplay. So once again, oops, my brand. I paired a convertible pinafore I made with brown flannel using my pinafore TikTok tutorial, featuring these cute little Art Nouveau lady buttons, with another wrap top that I made, which this one is unfortunately polyester, but it has this beautiful bluebell print. And I used a shorter bishop sleeve for this bodice, Now, unfortunately, I did not cut the neckline on the grain line or selvage, which caused it to be a little too revealing, but I added some elastic along the neckline, which added this cute ruffle vibe that I totally dig. And to really lean into the peasant Cinderella vibe, I added my tinsel apron, which came in so handy because I ran out of kindling the night before to keep the fireplace going in my house. So I collected some branches and had the cutest little cottagecore moment. Thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button, and I will see you all in the next year. Bye!